there, my friends and fellow Whovians. Welcome to another episode of Earth Station Who. That's right, folks. We're back, and we're going back to the world of Big Finish, and we are looking at the Second Doctor adventures. And of course, we don't go in order on our show. You know, we never do. So we're coming into part 2 of this, and of course, it's the Robert McCrimmon stories. It's awesome. We get to return to Jamie, and I was a little hesitant at first because I was wondering if it was going to be, if it was going to be, Jamie as a younger person, but on the cover art was Jamie as an older man. So, which totally makes sense. And this brings up the whole story about the 6B season and such, that the Doctor didn't originally go right into becoming Pertwee. And so there's been tons of stories about that, like how did the Doctor show up in the 5 Doctors or the 2 Doctors? And so it was interesting to see, and I'm glad Big Finish took advantage of this. So we're going to talk all about this one, and it's going to be we have a great crew to talk all about it. So, of course, let's welcome our guest for this week. Matthew Kretzel's back.
Hello, everyone.
When I think of Big Finish, especially the Second Doctor, you came to mind on this. And when I told you about it, it was like, ooh, I haven't listened to that one yet. So this is good.
Yeah. It was a good excuse to finally listen to it because I actually only picked up Beyond War Games, the first set, last year in Chicago and still had not heard it.
Wow.
This was a good excuse to actually delve into the range finally properly.
So did you listen to the first part before this, or did you for people who are completionists and stuff?
Well, for time reasons, I went straight into this. I had heard Michael Troughton and Frazer Hines together in some of the other stuff. They're in Annihilators, which was a Third Doctor Adventures release. They've also done 2 of the Lost Stories together, Death World, which is the original version of 3 Doctors, but also Operation Werewolf. So I had encountered them before, but not kind of in this context, in this range. So this was an interesting experience.
No. That's cool. I'm glad you were able to do it. And yeah, I had heard them in the 3 Doctor story, the Third Doctor storyline. And I was like, where does this pop up? And so now we have context now because of it and everything. So We'll talk a little bit more about that when we're into it. And let's, of course, say howdy to our regulars. Mr. Mike Gorton is here.
Howdy.
I always love hearing that howdy. It's always a nice thing to do. And of course,
my work here is done. Good night, everybody.
Good night. See you, Mike. He stopped by, said howdy. He's done.
Hey, leave on a high. That's what I say.
And Ms. Mary Ogle.
Hi, everybody. Fantastic to be here.
And last but never least in our hearts, Ms. Melanie Dean.
Hello, fellow Whovians. I can't wait to chat Who with you.
I like that. Is that your new catchphrase?
I've been saying this since the beginning, but okay.
Yeah. I know, but wibbly wobbly, timey wimey, forgetfulness, lots of things. It pops out. So we definitely would love to hear from you guys at home. Feedback at earthstationwho.com is the best way to do it. And of course, we got an email from our friend Pete. So we'll talk about that. Shocker there, folks. So Pete is our regular contributor. We definitely would love to hear from more folks, but definitely we will be spoiling the hell out of this one. It's been out for a couple of years, but you know what, we'd like to give you guys a little bit of warning and pick it up. It's worth it. Big Finish is such a great company to support and everything. So let's jump in with both legs because there's no news for Doctor Who right now, just lots of speculation, and I'd rather talk about this story. So this is called The Second Doctor Adventures, and I think there's 5 parts of it out already, and I think they're releasing the 6th. I'm looking on the Big Finish side right now. So it's pretty amazing because I know they, like Matthew had mentioned earlier, it started with after the Second Doctor Adventures Beyond War Games.
Yeah.
And then it went to, this was the second part. And then they had the Conspiracy of Raven, the potential Daleks, and they have a new one coming out next year. and in 2026, and doesn't have a title yet. So it's pretty cool stuff. And I love, because, I just got spoiled because in the Conspiracy of Raven, Zoe comes back. So it's pretty awesome. So I'm actually really looking forward to that. And it was great because, the second Doctor and Jamie were always my favorite companion and doctor. And it was, the chemistry between them, just how they acted with each other. And Jamie was always, somebody from the 17th century, 18th century, was always, fun to, see his reaction to things, but he was so accepting. There be flying cars. Doctor, there's a dragon after us, or, we Daleks again, stuff like that. It's always awesome. And so it was cool. Obviously, this is all of our first time listening to this one. It was in 3 parts, and we had, of course, the Jamie by Mark Wright, and then we had the Green Man by Paul F. Verhoeven, and then the Shroud by Bob Ayers. And I wish I could say all 3 were equal stories, but it'll be interesting. Do you guys want to go story by story, or just talk about overlap to start with, and then we'll go into the stories? Let's get initial thoughts. Matthew, since you're a guest, let's hear what your initial thoughts were.
I mean, as I said, I had heard Michael Troughton and Frazer Hines and some of the other stuff, but it was nice to finally be able to hear them together in their own range. And this was all part of Big Finish's thing around 2021, 2022, where they were relaunching kind of everything across the ranges. The main range had finished, after running from 99. So they saw it as an opportunity to kind of give every Doctor their own range and to kind of have ongoing storylines. And also for people who aren't completionists or don't have very deep wallets, and I include myself now in both of those camps, it was a chance that you could pick a Doctor, you could run with those stories and listen to him that way. So it was great to hear this. And also, as you said, the chemistry between Patrick Troughton and Frazer Hines on screen was just amazing. And it was always the question of, well, are they going to be able to replicate that? And by Jove, were they able to do so here? I will say that I think you're kind of right that the 3 stories here aren't kind of, equally good. I think the first one is really strong. The second one, maybe less so. But I did quite enjoy the final story, The Shroud. It's a really interesting one. And also playing around with a lot of the Season 6B tropes for people who don't know what Season 6B is. It's born out of things like the 5 Doctors, where the Doctor shows up with the Brigadier, and while they're in the tower, they run into phantoms of Jamie and Zoe. And not only do they recognize him, but Jamie remembers the Brigadier, which he ought not to have done. And the Doctor goes, well, you had your memories wiped. Well, how does the Doctor remember that his memories were wiped, if he regenerated straight into? Then the 2 Doctors happens, where you have an obviously older, second Doctor and Jamie running around, and they know who the Time Lords are, etc. Big Finish, I was surprised they did get around to doing Season 6B, because about 10, 12 years ago, there was a story as part of the early Adventures range called The Black Hole, where they filled in the 2 Doctors' plot hole. So everybody was like, well, I guess Big Finish isn't touching Season 6B anytime soon. And it's nice to be proven wrong, because it's great hearing them together, but also the dynamic between a slightly older, wiser Jamie and, the second Doctor as well.
Okay, that totally makes sense. It's interesting because how it was always, Troughton has gray hair in the, when he did the 2 Doctors, and Jamie looked great in that one. He looked like he barely aged in that. But it was interesting to see, like, I don't remember the second Doctor having gray hair. When did that happen? Type thing. Maybe they'll touch on it with Big Finish. Doctor, your hair turned gray or something. It could, it happens to the best of us. Trust me. So,
oh, yeah.
So it'd be interesting to see. Let's get some more initial thoughts. Mel, what about you?
My biggest bone to pick is whoever titled this one, because usually when I see a Big Finish, at least the series, I'm going to get an inkling of what it's about. And just naming it after the character of just James Robert McCrimmon, I'm like, and what? So then I had to. So I was kind of in a. Usually, I don't want to. I'd rather listen to it fresh and not research anything. But on this one, I kind of went, all right. Well, I want to at least know what I'm getting into in the. Oh, it's a second of a series. Oh, it's this. Oh, So past that, I didn't research any more, so that way I can at least kind of listen to the stories and see how it fleshed. But I really would like. You actually kind of mentioned it at the very beginning, talking about this. If I really wish they called this for the return of Jamie, so at least I kind of in my mindset knew
what to expect exactly.
What to kind of expect.
Yeah.
And just when you look at the catalog of Big Finish and how many wonderful, wonderful stories are out there, and you're scrolling. It's like walking in a bookstore. That's not a hook for me to go, oh, I need to click this. It's just one character name. So that's my biggest gripe with this was just maybe something else. Maybe, workshop that a little bit more. But I liked the 3 stories. Some are great, some not so.
Yeah, of
some
course.
Middling. I was entertained. I liked it. But I had to figure out where we were at first.
Right. Of course.
And I didn't know anything about the 6B. I didn't know anything, all that kind of stuff. So I could see now what they were maybe trying to fix here and there after the fact. But that's it. It was just my biggest gripe was, okay, and what's making me want to click on this other than you guys, you find folks saying, hey, we're going to review it. Okay.
Well, for me, it was just seeing the Doctor and Jamie together. It was like, okay, here's my money. Just take it, So, all right, Mary.
I really enjoyed this one. I had a lot of fun listening to it. I agree. The middle story is the weakest. Spoiler alert, middle story is always the weakest in Big Finish.
Oh, you're not really spoiling there. You're really not.
But the first one was driving me insane in the first few moments because this is part of the story structure, but it's all over the place. And so you're trying to figure out what the heck is going on. And it's harder in audio when they do time jumps and memory lapses and things like that. But you do get into it fairly quickly and figure out basically what's going on. And also I like that the first one is so character driven. I mean, Jamie's miserable and there are good reasons why. And Frazer Hines is very good at portraying that. And once the Doctor starts showing up, I mean, the chemistry between Frazer and the Doctor it really does light up when from the very first moment they meet again. My nitpick with this one is that it's supposed to be an older Jamie, and it would have been interesting to actually explore how an older Jamie would be different from his younger self, and he's not that different.
No, not at all.
So he doesn't. I mean, we change as we grow older, and he's been through a lot. So he's not going to be the same person he was then, but they just completely gloss over that. But still, overall, I really enjoyed this one.
Yeah, because I think it's something like over 40 years between the time he was sent back by the Time Lords and this story took place.
Yeah, it's quite a while.
Yeah. So, yeah, and people change in 40 years.
If they change in 40 years.
Well, yeah, exactly. That is very true. And it's interesting because you would have thought, over this time, like you said, experiences, wisdom with age, maybe. That's a whole different story. But,
or, even if it's not wisdom, even if it's bitterness, even if that would be understandable. But he regains, something from traveling with the Doctor, or, they didn't give him much opportunity for growth and change. And it would have been nice to have seen that.
Right. Nope. Agreed. All right. Mikey, what about you?
Yeah, I enjoyed this overall. But I will say, there were some issues. Certainly, I went in, Melanie's point, I went in cold. Like, I didn't know anything. I didn't even do research. Mel did some research. I didn't do research. I just was like, okay, well, for me, it's got Frazer Hines Michael Troughton in it, and I'm like, okay, that's enough for me because I think we've heard them before in other things, and they sound great together. It is weird. The dynamic must have, for them, it must be weird because it's obviously, when it was Patrick, Patrick was older, like, and now Frazer's the older one, and yet, they don't, yeah, they just have to sort of have the same dynamic. To Mary's point, they have to have the same dynamic, which I don't know, might have been kind of interesting to switch that up, but that's not what people want. People want, to your point, Mike, people want Jamie and the Doctor, the second Doctor, together again, just like they were in those adventures. And if that's what you're looking for, and that's the selling point for this, because it's named James Robert McCrimmon, that's what you're going to get. So for that, if that's what you're looking for, this is a must. Now, while the stories do vary in terms of their quality, sure, and certain stories highlight certain things. Like the second one, yeah, it might be the weakest one story-wise, but it's got the most like chemistry between the two of them, right? That either of the other two have, right? So if you're really interested in the chemistry of these two, then I could see where the second story would be like a home run. Whereas for me, I thought the third story was the strongest out of the three here. I didn't really. To Mary's point, the first story I kind of was like spent most of the time kind of trying to figure out what the heck was going on. In addition to the time jumps, because this is the second part of the set, the Second Doctor Adventures, and there's a lot of stuff that happens with Raven and everything like that. Look,
we got a lot to say about Raven.
I'm okay. Like, look, I love it when the writers don't spoon feed you things, right? They act like you have a brain and you can catch up. But man, that first story really puts that to the test because it assumes that you know a lot, not just about the Second Doctor Adventures, the previous set, which is what Beyond Board Games, is that right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Excuse me. But it also assumes that you know everything that there was about the Second Doctor and Frazer, like about the Second Doctor and Jamie. Like their origin, how they ended, everything like about that run. And if this is your first foray into Big Finish, if this is your first foray into the second Doctor and Jamie, like skip this. You need to do some homework first because otherwise a lot of this stuff is not going to make sense to you.
You will be lost.
I mean, because I know some stuff. I don't claim to know everything, but I know some stuff, and I was completely going, when does this take place? What is going on? Who are these people? What is that really referring to this? Is that... And I think it is bad form to keep referencing a origin story of the Doctor meeting Jamie when you can't see that story. like nobody could, that story's been lost, right? I mean, you can read it. There's, you can see synopsis of it. You can, you can read the Target novelization and everything like that. But really, like that story's been lost, and it's harder to find. So, referencing that and assuming everybody just is going to get that reference is, that's a lot to ask for listeners.
I agree. I agree with that, but it's interesting too because, you do need, but most Big Finish, if you listen to the Paternoster Gang for the first time, you don't know who they are, or anything. You don't know that they've appeared. If you're not a Doctor Who fan and you just picked up Big Finish or something, but a lot of they assume who these characters are too.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't suggest anybody pick up the second volume of Paternoster Gang and know everything. So,
right.
But in this one in particular, I thought I wish that Big Finish could have done something to help. I think for some reason it seemed like the gap was even bigger for me because they start with a story that doesn't take place in any sort of time order. It's all over the place. So that adds to the confusion. So I don't think that helps anything.
Well, a lot of it was in Jamie's mind too in this.
Yeah.
in the
Yeah,
first.
I mean, you didn't know
let-
what was real and
we-
what wasn't.
we might as well jump in with both feet on that story and everything since we're going into it anyway. So let's talk about Jamie by Mark Wright. It's a two-part story. It was fun because you had, Jamie take ill and, he was fighting, a fever and basically reliving adventures about the doctor and in his mind, but he didn't know who the doctor was because of the mind wipe that the Time Lords supposedly did at the end of War Games. But it sounded like, from what we found out in the story, it didn't stick. Anyway, it was not done right. So what do you guys, let's hear, we've heard bits and pieces, what you guys thought. Did the, jumping around take away from the story for you guys? Or did you,
Dream sequences and audio do not do well with me.
Yeah, that is hard.
I have a hard time following
That is
them.
hard.
It's sad. I mean, I literally need either I need a script, I need visual. For me, I need visual cues or something else, because it really took me a minute to go, wait, what? And then went, oh, and by the time it dawned on me that, we're in a dream sequence. Oh, wait, did I just wait? Because in my head, I'm now going back, rethinking everything, going, oh, okay, so that was a dream, that's a dream. I've now kind of disengaged from what's being fed in my ears now with the audio, and now I'm like, oh, wait, hold on, where am I? And I have to go back again. So
you could have done you could have done something like Wayne's World.
Story-wise, for my entertainment value, this was the hardest story for me, where with Mary, I agree, usually the second story is the weakest one, but maybe because the way I'm wired, this was the more difficult one for me to get.
No, I can agree with that. Yeah, because Big Finish has done this before.
Yeah.
And we've discussed it on the podcast, where it's very hard to portray an audio nonlinear time because you have no reference point at all, and they don't give you one usually. They're not, frankly, I don't think Big Finish is very good at portraying nonlinear time because you always end up confused. And what helped me was, it's funny, I had this moment as I was listening to it, and I was like, oh, this is like Slaughterhouse-5. This guy is unmoored in time. Okay. And then it went, and then it was like, oh, it's even beyond that. Some of it's not even real.
Yep.
Right.
But by the time you figure that out, you're like halfway through the story.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it helped for me that I was familiar with the World Shapers comic and some of the other things that they were referencing, because they were trying to basically have their cake and eat it too, like they've done with Mel, like they've done with Perry in other stories, where it's like, well, here's these characters with multiple continuities and multiple versions of their fates. Let's do them all at once and explain how this is all happening. So I think going into it with that bit of knowledge, I was able to pick up, it's like, okay, obviously these things are mutually exclusive, and then realizing what they were referencing, it's like, okay, I get this. But it's also one of those that they're, and not for the first time at Big Finish, and most certainly not for the last, I think a lot of supposition on their part that Doctor Who fans are buying these. Doctor Who fans are going to be familiar with every little bit of the lore, so they can pull something really obscure out of their, out of a hat. The World Shapers is a comic from 40 years ago now from Doctor Who magazine, that they can do that and people are going to follow it. But I think that's a pretty big supposition on their part. But actually picking up on what you were saying earlier, Mike, about being confused about everything, I thought there was enough context clues going into it to figure out, what was going on with Raven, who Raven was, and what everything was happening there. So, but again, that's a lot of supposition on their part to assume you're going to, be able to jump into it and follow that. But again, this was the second set in a range, and, the idea was people could pick and choose which doctors to follow. So maybe they were just assuming that if you were listening to the second set, you'd heard the first set. I don't know. But again, they're supposing a lot, and maybe not for the best.
Yeah, I mean, I can get that. I got, there was some clues there, and it is a fine line. I mean, it's a tough gig, right? I mean, under normal circumstances for anything, it's tough to tell a story and then balance that with needful exposition, right? And with audios, it's even more so, because you have to sometimes explain what's going on. I mean, like literally in the picture, instead of just hearing explosions, you have to have somebody go, "Oh, that guy just blew up that plant or something." Like, you just have to say stuff like that where you don't have to do that in a visual medium. So it's a fine line, but I did feel like that the first story really just said, I don't care about that line at all. I'm just gonna and it just did feel like kind of a dream. And yeah, I mean, when Raven's introduced in the first story, because to me that was the introduction to her. I'd never even heard of her before, didn't know who she was, knew nothing about Raven. So I was just kind of like, okay, well, hopefully they'll give me some clues as to find out who she is. And you don't really get a clear idea, and you still kind of don't, even after all these three stories, exactly who she is and what she is. And there's some mystery there, but until at the very end, when the second Doctor actually kind of introduces her to Jamie and says exactly who she is as far as their relationship. And you can kind of tell from the interplay between the second Doctor and Raven, but really it's just a lot of, to me, that's the thing. And for most of it, because I didn't know who she was, and the character was written as this really obnoxious, smarmy, not likable person, I just really was annoyed by her for most of the story in the first part. And even going into the other parts as well. I don't know how she was introduced in the previous volume, but I was not a big fan of hers in this story, and then going through this whole volume.
Nope, agreed. It was interesting because when they first introduced Raven, I was feeling like, okay, she's basically being the Doctor's watcher, kind of like how the fugitive Doctor in the Chibnall era had her watcher over her. And that's where, to me, that's where it was fitting in. But Raven was much, much more manipulative. And, I was glad to see her get her just desserts, you could say, in the third story. So we'll get into that a little bit more. What did you guys think about, finally when the Doctor and Jamie met up and, that Jamie finally remembered him and everything. It was just interesting. Did you guys like it? Did you think it was a little forced?
I don't know if I would say it was forced. I mean,
that was the point of the story.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it happened in the way it was going to happen.
There's the one part that I was pretty sure it wasn't a dream.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Well, exactly.
But I kept
It's
waiting.
all a
'Cause I'm like,
dream.
maybe he's still dreaming. Maybe he's still dreaming.
It was interesting how they had it was either the little amoeba or whatever that was in Jamie's brain, manifest itself to the Doctor outside of him. And it was just like what, and the Doctor knew right away that wasn't Jamie and everything. So it was interesting for that.
One thing that all three stories share is that the Doctor knows stuff that he does not reveal that he knows until the very end of these stories. And it did feel like that was a trope that was used a little too often for all three stories.
Yeah, if you do it in all three stories, it's like pulling Delgado's Master out of a hat in that first season. It stops being a surprise and it just becomes a okay moment.
Mm-hmm.
I always expect that the Doctor's going to be the smartest person in the room, but to the level that these stories really depend and are structured around the fact that he's planning stuff from the beginning that we're not privy to, and then they just pull it as a plot device at the end or towards the end. It got old for me. Yeah.
I could see that. I really could see that. It was interesting too, because, the Doctor, I felt like the second Doctor was a lot more, manipulative in this one than he ever was in, a lot of times during the second Doctor era, he was always trying to come across as the bumbling fool. But he was, having a plan in the meantime. But this time it felt like he was he had this whole plan already set up throughout the whole thing. And
Yeah, you could see Sylvester McCoy doing this
very,
one.
very much
Yeah.
so. Sorry. He was more like the Seventh Doctor than the Second Doctor
Yeah.
in some ways.
I mean, it's still kind of there in some of the TV stories. I mean, Tomb of the Cybermen happens entirely because the Doctor shows up and manipulates events because he wants to know how much Krieg knows about the Cybermen and what he's planning. Or, even the end of something like Enemy of the World where he's impersonating Salamander and he's actually goads, people into doing things, because he suspects, but he doesn't know for sure. So, but yeah, it's if you do it again in every single story in a box set, it kind of diminishes the value of doing that if you do it every single story.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I do think that one of the traits I like about the Second Doctor, played by Patrick Troughton, is that, he does, on the one hand, he's very convincing as a lovable, bumbling, charming guy that no one can take seriously. And he uses that to his advantage. And Patrick is really good at that. And I must say that overall, despite that some of the scripts kind of force his hand, I think Michael is really good at it too. I do think I don't think there was very much times where I was listening to this and I was like, oh, that's not Patrick. Like, I mean,
exactly.
Even though the voice isn't there, the character was there. Like, Michael really did a great job in his own take a little bit, but really did a good job, I think, in capturing the feel and the strengths and the everything about the Second Doctor that I love. I think Michael did a great job. It's a great service to him as an actor and a great service to him as a son with his father's legacy, I think.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
To be able to capture his father's voice, there were times it was eerie how much he sounded like his dad. The characterization, the mannerisms, and it was awesome. The voice sometimes, went off and you could tell it wasn't Patrick, but otherwise it was just like, this was just awesome, especially when Frazer and Michael were going, against each other and like jabbing and, having the conversation. It's like, that was Patrick and Frazer right there.
Yeah.
And, when we first, I didn't know that Michael was going to be, when we first were looking at to do this, I thought it was Frazer doing both voices. I said, oh, that's going to be a lot of work because Frazer does an amazing Patrick also and everything. So, but I'm glad they got Michael, and like I said, he did a great job.
Yeah, and the Second Doctor is very much a character of performance. I mean, there's a lot of discussion, of people reading the books and also the comics and stuff, that if you put the Second Doctor on a page, the character doesn't quite work. There's a certain mercurial quality to Patrick Troughton's performances that's really, really hard to capture without a performance there, whether it's from Patrick or Frazer or indeed Michael Troughton now, that it makes it really difficult to capture that character on the page. You need somebody to perform that role to kind of bring it out. And that's something that all three of them, I think, have done a good job. And I know that there was a lot of skepticism and stuff because Frazer does do an amazing version of Patrick Troughton. It has to be said, and I could, and having shared a stage with him while he was doing it, it is something to see and hear. There are limits to it, though, and I think that Big Finish were kind of becoming aware of it. If you listen to some of the later narrated Lost stories, there's times when Frazer's narration voice is Jamie, and also his Second Doctor start to kind of blend together. So I think it was a wise idea to kind of bring a second performer in, but it also allows them to bounce off of each other in the same way that Patrick and Frazer did back in the 60s and indeed in the 80s in Two Doctors.
Right. No, agree with that. All right. Any final thoughts on this one, on the first one?
Yeah, since we're talking about legacy actors, I also thought that Daisy Ashford did a great job.
Yes,
and it's cool because I didn't know until afterwards. I mean, she does a great Scottish accent, so I got to give her credit for that. She almost sounded like Kelly MacDonald to me, so I really appreciated that. But then to find out that that's Daisy is Carolyn John's daughter, Liz, who played Liz Shaw. And I don't think I've heard her Liz Shaw in Big Finish, but then when I was listening to, the bonus stuff and she was talking just in the interviews and everything, I was like, oh, I hear it now. Because it's masked in in the story because she's got this thick accent. But boy, what a great talent she is too. Because I did really like her performance, and yeah, I thought that she did a great job. And it's cool that that Big Finish is using legacy people, actors to keep the original, to sort of pay homage to them, but also the fact that they're really talented people. I mean, they're not just phoning it in and doing like she doesn't get the job just because she's the daughter. She can hold her own and she can do other stuff, and it's good that they're allowing her to do other things as well, or they're hiring to do other things as well.
Nope, agreed completely. And I found it kind of funny because, Carolyn, basically Carolyn John left Doctor Who because she was pregnant. And her daughter, who she was pregnant with, is now playing the same character.
Yeah. That is funny. That is funny.
So,
I haven't heard any of those adventures, but I'm kind of keen to, although I will say that the voice that they have that does the third Doctor does not hit me as well. I'm not as convinced of his work as some of the others that they've gotten.
mm-hmm.
Certainly not as good as I think Michael Troughton is. So that might take me a little while to get used to, because in these stories he's kind of we do hear him a bit, and I was just like that still is not working for me as well.
Yeah. If you want to hear her in a couple of things, Intelligence for War, which came out of, I think, the same year this did, is well worth a listen. But also one of the Diary of River song sets, New Recruit.
We did listen to her. And you're right. Yeah, we did that. Yeah. That was the last River song that we did.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
That,
wow, and I had completely forgotten about that.
Yeah, I was like, when you said you hadn't heard it, I was like, huh?
Yeah, my bad. But because I mean, we always cry justice for Liz, right? Because we just felt like she was the companion that should have lasted longer, and it's a shame that she didn't. And so it's nice to see that her stories continue with Big Finish.
Yep, agreed. Any other final thoughts? All right, let's go on to the Green Man. Everyone thought this one was the weakest one of the three. I actually enjoyed it. I didn't think it was terrible. I didn't think it was horrible at all.
Yeah, it's not horrible at all.
No, it's not terrible. And I will say that, despite the rear window lifted plot,
that's exactly what I was about to say, Mike. It was like taken right from Rear Window.
Yeah, and they admit that, they admit that on the bonus material.
They did that on purpose.
That was on purpose. But like I said, to me, like if you want Doctor and Jamie hijinks and interplay, like this is the story for you, because I mean they are all over each other. I mean I mean we find out later they're of one mind, which is, I don't know if I love the ending of that, but it does. And I also noticed too, Mary, to your point, even though they don't really say it, it did feel like I did feel like Jamie was taking more chances and a lot more confident in his abilities and doing this stuff than he was in, like, when we see him on the TV adventures. So it did feel like there was an older Jamie at play there. But then I think they undercut that by saying, well, that's because he was in constant communication with the Doctor and like telepathically. And I was like, I wish they hadn't done that. But at first I was kind of like, man, Jamie is just really confident, going in gung ho, which he's always been kind of brash. But in this one, you kind of felt like he could back it up more than, like, a lot of the stories. You're like, oh, Jamie, you can't handle what's coming. But then this one, you kind of feel like, yeah, you can.
You know what the funny thing for me about that was I kept on thinking, Jamie is probably in his late 60s, early 70s in this story. And, and he's digging through the garden and, jumping over walls and stuff. I couldn't see my grandfather do that.
He's fighting the crinoid, skinning it, and climbing into its skin. I mean,
exactly. I was just like listening to it. It's like, Jamie's an old man in this. And it's not like he's the young, late teens, early 20s, like he was on the TV show.
Right.
And yeah. And so I was just like laughing about that, hearing, all the things he was doing. And it's just like, oh, you wish, dude, you wish, type thing.
Yeah, it kind of would have been, you're right. And I think Mary made the point earlier where it doesn't seem like much has changed. And even though you want that interplay, that same interplay, I think they should have kind of leaned into it more as like, look at Lemon and Mathau in The Odd Couple and look at them in Grumpy Old Men. Like that's the way they should have approached the Jamie Doctor relationship. They should be grumpy old men in this in these stories, which probably doesn't sell as many copies of a Big Finish audios, but it still would probably be pretty fun, I think.
Exactly.
Yeah.
No, I agree with that.
Now I really want to see these two actors do The Odd Couple, by the way.
Of course.
Yeah, that would be great, actually. Yeah, I mean, I think one of the problems is it's hampered by the whole Rear Window thing because it's not anywhere near as suspenseful as Rear Window is.
No.
And so, just throw. That's like one of the things where you come up with it in your first idea, and you're like, "Hey, that would be cool," and then you're like, "No, that's not going to work." But that's not what they said. they kept trying and it wasn't working. I mean, and they should have leaned in more with the whole interaction between Frazer and the Doctor. And maybe even, I mean, I'm not sure, like you guys were talking before about how something's always in all these stories, something's revealed in the last few minutes. Like in this case, it's the telepathic thing. And you know what? If you're going to do that, reveal it sooner and then really lean into it. Because
they weren't fooling anybody. We knew Jamie wasn't dead. Like that.
Yeah.
They didn't even in the audio, the music and everything didn't really
it didn't go dark.
As he really died.
It didn't go evil, foreboding type music.
So I was kind of like, look, to Mary's point, if you're not going to do that, if you're not going to go all in and try to convince us that he's actually dead and play with that, then let us in on a joke. Let us in on
exactly.
it.
I wanted to hear, after we got the reveal, I would have loved earlier in the story, Doctor, get out of my head, or something, I'm doing as best as I can. Oh, yeah,
right.
Exactly. And there were so many opportunities for that. The villain was very one-dimensional. It was like you could see right through it. And, it was like the Chronoid eating, all the other guests and everything.
Yeah, it's just very mad scientist.
Exactly.
Sort of a story we've seen a lot.
I also felt like, and I don't know if this would have continued because we only get 2 stories before she has her comeuppance, but the sort of plots that have to so they come up with these plots and then they go, oh, well, we have to find a reason that Raven would send them there. And so that makes it even more like clunky because you're just like, yeah, this doesn't really make any sense why the Time Lords would give and care about any of this stuff and why Raven cares about it. And, she just torturing them. Is she just like, and then you just don't really care.
I don't like torture just for torture's sake. And that's what felt like in this storyline, in this one. And, there was just like, I wanted to almost like slap Raven, type thing. It was just like, no, don't do that.
Yeah,
but it was
just annoying.
I love the reaction though, when they revealed that they were using the psychic connection and they're what, type thing. and then they sadly burnt them out of their heads. Ooh, ouch, yuck. So
I do want to say that any criticism that I had about Raven shouldn't be passed on to Emma Noakes because I think she does a great job with what she's given.
Oh, she was having fun with it. She totally was.
But I kept hearing in the bonus material afterwards that she would look at the scripts and she would be like, oh, well, I'm really interested in this story because we find out that there's more to Raven and she's actually got some vulnerability. And I'm like, what scripts are you reading? Because I don't see that. But yeah, she seems pretty much one-dimensional and annoying, really, in these.
Yeah, I almost feel like they're trying to do Missy, but they are not able to walk that fine line.
Oh, right.
That Michelle
that's a good
Gomez
point.
walked.
That's a good point.
where you're evil, but you've got some potential there to not be evil, and sometimes you even actively help somebody,
But
even if it's for
Missy,
your own reasons. That never
but
happens.
Missy's pretty much BS crazy in a lot of ways. I never felt
I would
that.
say
I never
Raven's pretty BS crazy, just in a different way. She's
in a
a
completely
narcissistic,
she's
Well, they're playing with
narcissistic. Yeah.
Yeah, well, they're playing with a different set of tropes because it's secret agents here. It's not, the other things, and it's playing more on. It's less M and James Bond as it is. I'm going to be obscure British television here, but I know that Big Finish has done a series on it, so I wouldn't be surprised if this was an influence on it. Callan, the show from the late 60s, early 70s. The relationship that the Doctor and Jamie have with Raven is very much Callan's relationship with the Control character in that show. They're constantly being sent off to do things without getting all the information, being thrown in on the deep end and being expected to, fix things. And then when Callan doesn't do things the way necessarily Control wants, there's the whole, well, if you had told me everything, I'd be able to have done this. So I think that that's more of the interplay that they're going for here, rather than, trying to play, evil Time Lord with good intentions or whatever. But, I mean, there's a whole history of rogue Time Lords and also the Gallifreyan CIA, which is all going on here as well.
Yeah,
Right.
and I think we can all unfortunately relate to, managers or bosses that we've had that give us just enough information to fail, right? Like, so,
Oh yeah.
like that's what their job seems to be. So, so on that point, yes, she's somebody you can identify with, like, oh yeah, I recognize that, but that doesn't make me want to have her part of the stories anymore.
Well, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, exactly.
Well, because it just gets aggravating. Because
it gets
it's
aggravating,
Yeah.
and each story she's setting the Doctor up to fail. She
Yeah.
didn't.
Yeah,
she wasn't
it's the same thing every time.
Every time there was no. It was like a lose-lose situation, but the Doctor was able to pull it out, each time, and get ahead of her.
And
Right.
despite her smugness and the acting, they don't write her like she's the Doctor's equal. Like, I never get the impression that the chemistry between her and the Doctor are one of really interesting. That's the difference between, Mary, you pointed it out. That's the difference between Raven and Missy. Because with Missy, you're like, oh, this is a character that can go toe to toe with the Doctor on every level, and you never get that with Raven.
Yeah.
Agreed.
And also going back to, I think, Mike, your earlier point, it just makes the stories convoluted to have to figure out a reason to get Raven into the story, for Raven to want to send them on these things, instead of just letting them, do their thing and roam through time and space, or indeed just manipulating the circumstances to get them where they need to go and then popping in somewhere along the lines to say, actually, you're here for this reason. It does get a little tiring, especially, it's probably the reason why the third story probably works the best out of the three, is for exactly that reason, in terms of using Raven as a character and trying to do that.
Well, exactly. The Doctor was playing in the third story to her ego. You could be the one who, is the hero in this one. You beat, the bad guy. You beat the darkness and everything like that. And it was just really interesting with that. And I thought it was just like, there was possibilities, but it was just like not played out as well. So let's go into the third story, actually. So
Nice segue, Matthew.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Matthew. You were awesome.
Wasn't necessarily what I was aiming for, but you're welcome.
Yes. So the shroud. So
Yeah, because to piggyback on what Matthew's talking about with the shroud, I do like the fact that the shroud has a little bit more to do with Raven, but the thing is, she doesn't come in until the third act, and
Right.
so at the beginning, you're kind of like, well, why are they here? Are they supposed to be doing something? And did Raven send them? What's the purpose of this? And so you're kind of going, are they on their own? And so you don't even really hear from Raven until the very end, where you realize, oh, this has everything to do with Raven and the Time Lords. This would have been kind of some nice information to know before, I think. But other than that, I thought the story itself had a lot of interesting elements to it. And I really like how a lot of things played out in this story. And I do think that it was the strongest of the three.
Mm-hmm. It was the most fascinating because you have, the miscommunications between the alien force and the humans on the base and, or colonists. And you, they assume that the shroud was sent by the squid people. And
Hey,
it was,
that's a term we don't use around here. How dare you, sir?
I'm edgy that way, so it's okay. But,
He's reclaiming it for them.
exactly.
I did love the line about it is okay. I have experienced human prejudice before.
I love that.
Hey, I don't
It
know
was
anybody who doesn't have tentacles shouldn't be using that term. That's what I'm saying.
Well, we've been meaning to talk to you, Mike. So there you go. It was interesting. I liked it. I knew the doctor knew something was going on, that everything wasn't what it seemed like. And this one was the most mysterious. This one, had tension in it. It had, you had, trying to guess where it was going. And I liked it. And I liked how and this happens all the time on Doctor who you think is the bad guy isn't the bad guy. They're there to help. And, it's just misunderstandings. And that happens more in real life than not, actually, a lot of times. So it was real interesting to see. And, I like how the doctor was like, again, like we've said, the doctor almost knew right away what was really happening. And that was part of, I would have liked him to have discovered a little bit more in this one. But, that's just me.
Yeah, I mean, this one frustrates me a little bit, but because and I think it's just mostly plot wise. I mean, it's a base under siege story, and there's nothing wrong with a base under siege.
No, they're always
story. But it just keeps sort of maybe it just throws in one too many cliches or something. But I mean, don't get me wrong, I still enjoyed it. And actually there's like some of the secondary characters were more alive for me in this one. Like when Danya dies, I actually, I felt something. I was like, oh no. And and it's especially tragic when you find out she basically died for nothing. Because what she thinks is happening is not what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's a scientific, like the blindness thing or the darkness thing, that's a science fiction trope that happens a lot. And I don't know, felt a little bit overplayed, but I mean, they actually don't dwell on that much at all, except for maybe what happens to Raven at the end.
Yeah, they quickly get around it with the devices that they're wearing.
Yeah.
The dream scopes that they're wearing. So,
the scopes.
It kind of does sort of like, it would have been kind of nice to see them, flounder around for a bit. I agree.
Yeah.
And the fact that somebody's manipulating them to do this they're using the weaknesses of people interacting and communication to their own advantage. I was really disappointed to sort of find out that it was, Iskandar, is that what we're calling it?
Iskander.
Yeah.
Iskander.
That was doing that. And it wasn't like Raven, because I was like, for Raven to really get her comeuppance, I really felt like she should have been like the main baddie here that was manipulating everybody. But it is what it is. So it's not a perfect story, but it maybe it was a little bit more convoluted than it needed to be. But I still thought there was interesting things that happened. I think my biggest drawback, though, is that for a box set that's named after James Robert McCrimmon, he doesn't do anything in this one.
In the last
the basic
one, no.
companion stuff of go ask questions, go do this.
He doesn't.
Go
he
on the
doesn't
fetch
even
quest,
need to be.
Jamie.
He doesn't even need to be here. Like he doesn't add anything to the story.
Yeah.
No,
he really
he doesn't. Nope, agreed. And it was interesting. I liked how the doctor, suspected that Paul was more than he seemed to be in this.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
And, and it was just like, and, how the aliens were like, we don't sense him. Who is he? Who is that
Yeah.
person talking to? And it was just like, oh. And it was interesting how he was a manifestation of the Shroud. I did like that. That was pretty awesome. But I agree with what you said, Mike, about Jamie not real. He was just a basic companion. This was his box set. This was all supposed to be about Jamie, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was just like, wait a minute. Did I enjoy the third story? Loved it. Loved it, loved it, loved it. And it was awesome to be able to listen to that waiting in line at the DMV. And it was perfect, So it made it even better. So it was perfect with that.
I mean, it's one of those stories where there's a lot going on, and maybe they needed to take out one of the plot lines, and that would have helped,
Mm-hmm.
tighten it up. I'm not sure
Nope.
everything had to be there.
Nope.
Give Jamie some character moments.
Yeah. We say all that, but I kind of feel that, the scene where, they try to break in and they get caught and it turns into a firefight, I feel like the earlier Jamie probably would have gone down fighting, but he's the one who's the sensible one who says, no, this is madness. We have to stop. And I feel like that's his moment in the story. But that said, I do think it's kind of overall right for everything else he does across this entire episode. It could be basically any Doctor Who companion, from the last 60 odd years could be in that part, and it wouldn't have made a whole lot of difference.
Yeah,
Nope,
and he
agreed.
only does that because the doctor comes through and tells him that it's
Yeah.
okay. Like he doesn't use any knowledge that he generates himself. He should feel in his bones that this is not right. By this point in his life, he should know that something wrong is going on, I think. So, but they don't even really give him that. So, the other question I have for you, this is kind of, look, I know that Time Lords are going to do Time Lord shenanigans, right? Like they're going to do that, right?
Right.
This whole series is banking on Time Lord shenanigans, like a offset. I think, as Matthew pointed out, a little like group of Time Lords doing really awful things, more so than the Time Lords usually do. Really, I mean, it seems like, I don't know. Anytime that Doctor Who just goes, oh, well, the Time Lords are behind it and they're doing this thing because it's bad. It takes me out of it because it doesn't mean anything to me. Like that doesn't. I've never been able. I don't think they've ever really consistently been able to present the Time Lords in a way that I care about them one way or another. I don't like. They're not consistent enough. We meet occasional Time Lords, which are interesting, but usually those are renegades. But almost, the whole thing about Gallifrey's gone, Gallifrey's back again, Time Lords are back, Time Lords are gone, that kind of thing. It just, I guess I've gotten so weary of all of that I just like to bank a whole series on you're doing things for this group that I don't care about. To me, that was a weak point too. And
of
in this
course.
particular story, they're doing something that's like really terrible, that's resulting in lots of innocent lives, and they're manipulating planets and society here into a level that I haven't seen in a while. I don't know if I've seen ever, really. And that didn't really land with me either.
Well, we had the Time Lords manipulating the Doctor in the third Doctor era.
No, they
when
manipulate the
Justice
Doctor
League-
all the time. I'm just talking about they're manipulating a whole planet
I
to
mean,
do
going
things
as
like
far as
yeah. I
firing
mean, the whole premise is that humans have discovered they're getting involved in time travel, and the Time Lords have taken upon themselves to be like, nope, they've got to put an end to that, and they do so in the most convoluted and stupid way. Even the Doctor points this out.
Well, that is
Yeah.
very Time Lordy.
I was going to
Yes,
say,
no, it's on
I was
brand.
gonna say, Trial
It's
of the
very
Time Lord.
Time Lord,
They, you
yeah.
know, Trial of the Time Lord. They pulled the Earth halfway across the universe just because somebody had hacked into the Matrix. I mean,
Okay,
you know,
so
Exactly.
So I don't know if Matthew knows this, but we haven't yet watched the Trials of the Time Lord, or even dipped
yeah,
our toe into that because we are really reluctant to do so. So you don't use that as an example.
well, there's other examples from throughout the show's history
Sure.
of
Yeah.
Time Lords getting involved and not doing it. The Minoans, or whatever they're called in Underworld, you know, their entire civilization was wiped out because of Time Lord meddling with technology on their planet. And it's happened in Big Finish too, the Gallifrey range and Narvin and stuff, you know, the CIA and other offshoots of it, you know, literally pulling entire planets out of existence because, you know, somebody might discover time travel technology. So it felt very in keeping with that. So I did see that particular twist coming. I don't think, you know, it did anything to hamper my enjoyment of the story. To be honest, having the aha moment and being proven right was rather nice. But yeah, I think there's precedent for it, and you know, and the Second Doctor in particular being, you know, because of, you know, the events of War Games and everything else, and now being in the situation he's in, also being hypersensitive to the fact that this is what the Time Lords decided to do. When, as he points out, there were so many easier ways to have dealt with this that didn't involve, you know, nearly killing off an entire planet full of people.
Right. Yeah.
Exactly.
I mean that and I'm not saying it's not on brand. Like I said, I you know, I'm not used to them doing it to this level, but to me they've been so inconsistent with it that I like I said, it just doesn't I don't I end up not caring because
Yeah.
I'm
Well-
just like that's just it's like, okay, Time Lords did it. It's the Time Lord thing. Okay, well that's fine.
Well, it was
I'm not
interesting.
emotionally invested in that. Whereas
I did find it interesting though when the Doctor got captured in that story, and he was, you know, when they did the scan of him, as soon as they found out that he was a Time Lord, we surrender, you know, and you know they gave up and everything because the Time Lords, you know, people are living in fear of the Time Lords. And, you know, and it's like the Time Lords are supposed to be just a society that observes and not get involved with anything. And, you know,
that ship
they were
sailed a long time ago.
Oh, I know, but they were at this point in the Doctor's era, they were just supposed to be a race of a legendary race, you know, like, you know, whispers in the background and everything. They don't really exist, but they, you know, they're tall tales like Mount Olympus and the gods of, you know, Greece type thing. And so it was always interesting. And then, you know, he's a Time Lord, you know, that's what, and it's like, oh, we surrender. We're not going up against you, you know, type thing.
But
So-
the fact that like they're like the Doctor's going to like, you know, take Raven to face the Time Lords, I'm like, that if the Raven's part of a subset of Time Lords that are manipulative, and I'm just like, how is that different than any of the other Time Lords? Like, I'm just like, why would that be any different? Like, there's no, you know, and it's not like a, you know, it's not like a parallax view kind of thing where you just sort of feel defeated at the end because of this machine that's happening. They don't even kind of give you that element to it, which I would have probably appreciated more than just, and maybe as this series continues, maybe they do get there, you know, because I think the next series would continue on to that. And they kind of hinted that you haven't seen the last of Raven. So who knows what would happen after this. But as far as, you know, just like Time Lords did it, I'm just like, I can't get invested in
Well, it's interesting because, you know, when Paul took, you know, Raven at the end, and technically the Doctor and Jamie were free, you know, and then let's go try to go wherever we want to go, Doctor. And then you hear, you know, typical the TARDIS going off kilter, of course. And, you know, that's where they ended it, which they used to do all the time during the Second Doctor era. They always went into the next adventure in that type thing. So it was interesting to see. And it got me curious. Oh, I want to listen to the next part. I want to find out what happens. I want to find out what happens to Raven. I want to see, you know, how does Zoe get involved? How do they end up on the moon base or wherever and run into her? I just found that real interesting, and it'll be very curious to see. And it did whet my appetite for it, and that's a sign of a good adventure. So,
Yeah, I think there's a reason why RTD got rid of the Time Lords when he brought Doctor Who back. It's like,
Oh, very much so.
retcon these guys right away.
Yeah, I think that's why a lot of creators do that, and then some creators, I mean, look, I love Stephen Moffat's era, but man, I don't know if anything really benefited from, like, as far as the Time Lords go, from his run either. So
I mean, to be fair, Doctor Who, since about 2000, even before RTD came in, I don't think it's known what to do with the Time Lords. I mean, the Eighth Doctor books blew them up at one point. The Doctor was one of about 5 or 6 who were left in the whole universe. Modern Who keeps going back and forth on them, and of course, RTD retconned them out of existence and then brought them back just to turn them into, intergalactic suicide bombers. I mean, it is, Modern Who doesn't know how to deal with the Time Lords. And that is, straight through into, through Moffat, through Chibnall. We haven't really dealt with it to an extent with RTD2, and we might not based on what's going on at the moment. So it doesn't surprise me that, the fiction, beyond that, the spin-off stuff like Big Finish hasn't had any idea what to do with them either.
no, because usually it's based on, like, whatever the creators or the writers were inspired by the stories that they like. So depending on what era, what companions and everything like that got them into Doctor Who, and what they like about Doctor Who is going to reflect. So that's why you get so many different versions, which I don't mind either. I mean, it's like Big Finish continuity doesn't have the it has the luxury of being, like, more open-ended, even though you could argue that the series has been pretty open-ended as far as continuity goes. So, and consistency. So, but that's part of the fun, I think. So, yeah, that's not what I'm coming from. But, to your point, I would be curious to listen to more. I really, really like the interaction between the Second Doctor and Jamie, enough that I would. And look, as much as I'm criticizing some of the stories, I did find them all really interesting. They went by. I was not bored by any of them, and I would listen to more. I thought they were all pretty solid and fun.
Mm-hmm. I'll probably go back first to listen to the first part, so I know how they got involved with this. And that's
the first part didn't have Jamie.
I know. But yeah, it's called Beyond War Games. So definitely check it out, folks. It's available. I think right now in the States it's $26.79 for the download. Not too expensive and everything. So definitely check it out. Let's go ahead and start rating this one. 1 out of 5 TARDISes. 1 being the worst, 5 being the best. We're going to rate the whole series, not each episode. So let's do that. It would just take too long to do the other way. Yeah. All right, Mel, you're up first.
I would give it for me, a solid 3. It wasn't the best. It's not the worst. I got confused in the beginning, so I'll probably, listen to it again, because now I know kind of where we are when it comes to the dreams and stuff like that. And one thing I wanted to mention about the Shroud was, of the 3, I felt like the musical score, the sound cues, everything else was much better in that one. So I felt more immersed in, the planet and knowing what the darkness is. I felt like there was more atmospheric kind of fun with that, and they really lent in with their music, the scoring and everything. So
sure, 3. Totally makes sense.
Overall,
3.
It was fun.
Matthew.
Oh, doing a quick bit of math and averaging everything up, I'm going to give it a 4, I think. I think it's, it gets more right than it does wrong. I don't think it's perfect by any means. I think that middle episode brings it down a bit. But I think when it gets things right, it gets things right. And also the chemistry between Michael Troughton and Frazer Hines, kind of recreating the kind of, how they were with Michael's father in the 60s. I mean, it's a lot of what I could have asked for from the set. And from the series. And indeed, I want to go back and finally listen to Beyond War Games. It's been sitting here for the better part of a year. So it's doing something right, I think.
Okay. Fair enough. Mary.
I think I'm also going to give it a 4. I mean, overall, I really enjoyed it. It kept my interest throughout the whole thing. It never really dragged for me. I wouldn't recommend it as a first time foray into Big Finish, but I would say if you're a second Doctor fan, and especially if you love Jamie, then I think you're really going to enjoy this, and you're going to be impressed by how Michael Troughton and Frazer Hines recreate that chemistry. They're both really good. Most of the acting in this is really solid. I mean, as annoying as Raven is, the actress is great.
Yeah,
I mean, she's
exactly.
really running with it. It's not her fault that she wasn't given more than one note to do.
Mhm.
And I can see her desperately trying to look for the vulnerability in Raven.
Yeah.
But it's not really there. Maybe it gets there in the next one. Who knows? She's very one note. But that's, I think, the problem, like the whole Time Lord problem we often have, is that they are cardboard cutouts. We don't really get to know most of the other Time Lords. They're usually very one note characters. So, but overall, really enjoyed it. I would recommend it. So I'm giving it a 4.
Okay, Mikey.
Well, if we were just ranking it based on the chemistry of Fraser and Michael, I would give it a 5, 6, 10, whatever. But I mean, that's solid. So if you're a fan of the Second Doctor era, particularly working with Jamie McCrimmon, then yeah, this is a must. Although I would suggest, even though Jamie's not in it and I haven't listened to it, I would suggest starting with the first volume. And then going to the second one, just because I think it would be less jarring, and maybe watching War Games again. I don't know, but
All
in
10
any case,
parts, listen to it, or watch it.
well,
It'd be
you
great.
guys just watched the short version, right? So that's
Yeah.
there's an abridged version, right? So but otherwise, story wise and everything else, it's gonna put it down for 3 to me, because it was fun. I can't really feel like I'm going to revisit this. I'm kind of curious to see where it goes, but not like, if it wasn't for Michael and Fraser being part of it, like if they weren't in the next volume, I'd be like, nope, I pass. Because I don't really care enough about Raven and her story. And so it's fun to listen to, but Big Finish, we know, is capable of much better. Yeah, so 3. That's average.
Okay. For me, I'm going to do 4. I'm going to agree with everybody. There were some weak points, but the chemistry between Michael and Fraser were just amazing. It felt like his dad was up from the grave, and literally, they brought him back for Big Finish, which was pretty awesome. It was a lot of fun. The stories were not evenly paced, but I enjoyed them all, and I'm looking forward to hearing further adventures with them. But like I said earlier, I will go back and I will pick up the first part so we can listen to part 3 and part 4 and further on. And they keep giving me Doctor and Jamie adventures. I'm there. That's no if, whats, or buts. And you know what? I'll put the extra bucks in just to hear that. So, you know what? I owe it to Fraser because he scared us away from his table because we're like, it's Fraser, type thing. So, and he's a super nice guy. He is super, super nice guy. But, Mary and I could attest that, we got starstruck. So it was cool.
Yeah, that's okay.
Exactly.
It was very understandable.
Exactly. So definitely check it out, folks. Definitely would love to hear from you guys. If you can, please feedback at earthstationwho.com. Peter's email is saying that he enjoyed it, but he was in the process of listening to it when we're going live with this podcast. So he will have his full review the next time out. Okay. So he did say he was having issues with the pacing in the first story. So we'll find out more when he writes us. So I could understand that. All right, kids. So with that being said, we'll be back again in 2 weeks. We definitely would love to hear from you guys. Like we said, if you get a chance, please like and subscribe. It's the best way you can actually, tell people that you're enjoying our show, that let others know about it. Tell your friends, tell your neighbors. we would really appreciate it. Check us out up on social media. Instagram and Facebook are the two biggies that we have. We definitely would love to have you guys participate in all the fun with that. All right, let's thank everybody for being here. Matthew, thank you for being our official Big Finish Doctor Who Second Doctor guest.
Yes, thank you. It's always a pleasure to come on and talk Big Finish and, well, anything really.
Well, that's awesome. It's always good to enjoy your company, my friend. Anything you have going on?
Not at the moment. I am still reviewing various Big Finish Lost stories for the Sea Lion Press blog, so they seem to be putting one or two of those up a month. So Sea Lion Press is a publisher of alternate history who I've written stuff for, including a Sidewise award-winning short story a few years back. So I'm contributing to their blog and slowly making my way through the Lost stories in random order.
Gotcha. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you as always, my friend. Mary Ogle, thank you so much for being with us.
Oh, thank you. I really enjoyed this one. Had a fun time.
Awesome. Anything you want to promote?
You can find me at maryogle.com or on Etsy at eVision Arts.
Excellent. And Melanie Dean, always a pleasure.
Always fun talking Doctor Who with everybody here.
Yes. And, do you want to promote your stuff?
The thing that I'm doing now, actually tomorrow night, I'm going to be on a podcast about westerns. We're going to be talking about westerns, and I know I'm terrible because it's Dave Chapman's kind of helping out with it, and I do not know the series name yet, so I will give you more information on the next time. But the one I get to talk about is Rio Bravo, so we're going to be going through a lot of westerns. So I'm stupid happy about that, and so that's just a little tidbit real quick, and I'll promote it more when I remember the title and everything like that.
And here I thought you were going to talk about the gunfighters. There you go.
That's on the list.
I figured. I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
So sorry. Thank you as always. And Mr. Mike Gordon, thank you, my friend. We made it through another one.
We did. And as always, it's my pleasure.
Anything you want to promote?
Yes, in addition to the other podcasts I'm part of, I did want to point out the New Legend Lounge. We recorded and released, we released one new episode, which is announcing formally the Jukebox Thrillers project that we're part of, that Mary's part of. And that also we've got a new one coming out, which should be out by the time this episode comes out, where we get together and review our summer box office predictions from the last year, which was a crazy time. So you get to see how wrong we were about everything as usual. But we had a lot of fun doing it. So look for that coming up pretty soon.
Excellent. My stuff real quick. We over on Tales from Hollywoodland this last week, we got to look at our favorite musicals, and so we got to talk all about Broadway, and so it was a lot of fun. And I grew up with my grandmother taking me to go see Broadway shows up in New York, and it was really awesome to be able to grow up, to be able to see The Music Man, and going to see The Sound of Music, and shows like Something Happened on the Way to the Forum and Fiddler on the Roof. It was just some amazing stuff. But my big one was, of course, Pippin. Seeing it with Ben Vereen on Broadway was just awesome. And for a 6-year-old, it was like magic. And Broadway is always going to be magical to me and everything. So definitely check that up on Tales from Hollywoodland. Over on Julian Schlossberg's Movie Talk, this week we have a really good episode. We have, of course, filmmaker Barry Sonnenfeld joining us once again, talking about The Addams Family, Get Shorty, and Men in Black. It's a lot of fun to be able to hear his stories about, working with the Coen brothers and, items like that. So Julian and him have a great conversation. So you definitely could check it out. So please check out those podcasts wherever fine podcasts are found. We will be back again in 2 weeks. And we are going to be, of course, next time we are looking at an amazing tale. We are looking at The Planet of Evil with Tom Baker's Fourth Doctor. So we're going to be hopping around again with that. So it should be cool. Of course, us do anything in order? God forbid. No, never. We haven't done it from the beginning. Still not going to do it now. So, unless we reboot the series and start with the very first episode, we could do it all over again. Keep us away from Trial of a Time Lord. That's all we say. So, of course, and it's wonderful to see everybody. I hope everyone is enjoying fall. It's still too hot to be fall here in the eastern United States, but I hear it's on the way somewhere, maybe, possibly. On behalf of Mike Gordon, Melanie Dean, Mary Ogle, Matthew Kressel, and myself, Mike Faber, we'll see you here next time on Earth Station Who. Peace and Olanzi, my friends. Ciao. Bye.
You have been listening to Earth Station Who, a pop culture podcast dedicated to all things Doctor Who, featuring talents from throughout space and time. All topics on the show are the sole opinions of the individuals and are to be used for entertainment value alone. You can subscribe to our show wherever fine podcasts are found, or check out our website, earthstationwho.com. Don't forget to check us out on Facebook or Instagram, and if you enjoyed the show, please write to us at feedback@earthstationwho.com. Thank you so much for listening, and we will see you on the next journey of Earth Station Who.
This has been a broadcast of the ESO Network. Be part of the crew and help support our shows by donating to our ESO Patreon or by shopping for the TeePublic store, which can all be found at www.esonetwork.com. The ESO Network, your station for all things geek.